Suleiman Merchant, actress Juhi Aslam, plus a live session with Pakistani singer Umar Nadeem and live tracks from Saeem Zahoor. Join me, Gagan Garwal, on Monday from 6:30 p.m. on the BBC Asian Network.
Good afternoon, it's 18 minutes past 2. It's 27 years, not to the day obviously, but it's 27 years since 1984. Do you believe that in that time there's been any justice for what happened to the Sikhs? This week... Sorry, it is, yes, almost to the day, yeah. This week is an important week, of course, for Sikhs all over the world because it does mark the 27th anniversary of the anti-Sikh riots in India. Many of you would agree that the events of 1984 have shaped Sikh history and Sikh identity, who, after all, does not know somebody who was caught up in it. So how did it change your life? How has it shaped your identity, perhaps, as a British Asian? 27 years on, what should Sikhs take from what happened 27 years ago? How can you use that to bolster who you are? Is it one of anger and pain, quiet self-reflection, or, strangely perhaps, a source of strength that those who lost their lives did not die in vain? Joining me today in the studio is Harinder Singh, one of the original co-founders of the Sikh Research Institute in Texas. He's in the UK doing talks about 1984 and Sikhism. And a very good afternoon to you, Harinder.
Good afternoon, nice to be here.
It's really nice to have you here. Now, let's talk about this issue of justice. 27 years. Who has been brought to trial for this?
Well, the Indian state has done 11 commissions and inquiries. They
love a commission, don't they?
They love commission inquiries. You know, I generally say there have been more commission inquiries than convictions in the last 27 years. And essentially, there are several cases pending, including for the sitting ministers in the Indian cabinet. The one which is in light these days is of Sajjan Kumar. He is a sitting cabinet minister and his trial is pending, and hopefully there will be a first major conviction in next coming month. But you never know. You know, the Indian Intelligence Bureau, which is called CBI, Central Bureau of Investigations, in some cases they have not even accepted the cases or have not turned in their reports. In other cases, the witnesses have been coerced, have been bought out, or are dying. So from the perspective of has the state accepted the responsibility, or the police or the Delhi administration at the time? No. The last commission, Nanavati Commission, it basically said that they admit that it was organized and planned and state did play a role in it, but they said they don't have the capacity to find anyone guilty and give them any punishments. So at least in the last 27 years, I'm just trying to put things in perspective, there has been admittance by the commissions set up by Indian government that this was a pre-planned attack, this was about destroying and killing Sikhs and their property, but they are not going to the next level of finding people guilty.
So this is a statement of fact.
This is a statement of fact now admitted in Indian courts.
That the state was complicit in the murder of Sikhs 27
Well, not just complicit, they actually were active in either allowing the genocide to continue or actually providing the voter registration list to the members who were committing these crimes to mark and highlight the Sikh houses and businesses.
Wow. Okay.
Yes.
So the bureaucratic workings of the Indian state was used for the benefit of people who wished to murder Sikhs.
That's
27 years ago. And a commission has said that happened.
Nanavati Commission has accepted this much. And there have been several independent reports. I would say they are not even Sikh reports. Former Chief Justice of India, Justice Sikri, put out a report in 1985 and saying this was a pre-planned mass murder of the Sikh community in Delhi.
Harinder, what is a Sikh's relationship with the Indian state when a Sikh knows in his heart or her heart that that state that they may well swear allegiance to and feel very much part of was complicit and actively involved in the murder of their own people? I mean, I find that quite... I suppose it's... The scale is obviously not the same, not to take anything away from what happened in 1984, but how a Jewish person feels about the German state. I
That's
mean,
right.
Can you be an Indian Sikh? I mean, it seems just quite an interesting thing that it's almost a cloud that hangs over every Sikh when it comes to the question, how Indian are you?
You're hitting a very sensitive area now. This is where there has been a conspiracy of silence, I'll call it, within the community as well, because there are parts of Sikh community within India as well as in the diaspora, including in the Western world, UK, US, Canada, other places, who feel that how long does one has to wait to get justice and recognition of what really happened was a planned genocidal event. And so some are saying enough is enough. And the ones who feel enough is enough, they refuse to identify themselves as Indian, and usually they recite something akin to what you just mentioned, parallels from the Nazi Germany era, that how can a Jew cite to be in German, although they even went through Nuremberg trials. But if you even look at 3 months ago, I'm from America, so 3 months ago they found an officer in America who was brought in and found guilty here in the courts. So the point is, state has admitted to its fault, but it's not doing anything about it. So the idea of...
That's not cathartic
exactly.
enough, is it, for
earlier I was listening to you were talking about relationships in the family, and a basic psychology will tell you that even in a personal level of girlfriend, boyfriend or spousal relationship, unless things have been addressed, people cannot move on. Here, Sikhs are being told to move on where things haven't been addressed. So it has created a national, or not a national in a state sense, but a national in a community sense. There are 27 million Sikhs worldwide, and they continue to go through this trauma in the months of June and November every year.
Do you think, Harinder, that the state, regardless of what party it is, are waiting for these men, and it's predominantly men, to die? They'll start that.
I asked this question to Harvinder Singh Phulka, who actually is a standing counsel for the Indian government. He's a Supreme Court lawyer in India. He is representing the survivors of Delhi. So we are just talking about Delhi, although all over India these things took place. And he's been fighting those cases for the last 26 years. 3 days ago I asked him this question. I work with him on other projects as well. I said, why do you think there is a delay? Is it intentional? And his blanket answer was, of course it's intentional, because some of the perpetrators are dying. One of them, H.K.L. Bhagat, has died. Some of the witnesses are dying, and they're buying time to either coerce them or buy them. And actually, one of the sitting Congress party's ministers went to pay off one of the witnesses not to identify the person in the court. So absolutely, there is a delay mechanism. We in fact asked him a question.
It's called filibustering, they call it in the British courts.
And also in the US legislature, the term is used quite a bit when you don't want a bill to get introduced and voted on. Yes, and he also said actually the judiciary is also part of it, because the commissions and judiciary can act on certain these things, but they choose not to, and they keep delaying this. Last week Indian media...
This is a cancer. At the heart of the Sikh-Indian relationship, the relation between Sikhs. I mean, I don't wish to be over dramatic, but I don't think you can be over dramatic about what happened in 1984.
And every media at the time, including BBC, reported, New York Times, as to what really had happened there, and they bring up this issue that you can't talk about what happened in India and Punjab after 1984 without contextualizing in the events of 1984, because there were people who were serving in the Indian Army. They left their jobs to go protect Sikhs, to fight for Sikh rights. There were people who, like Khushwant Singh, one of the major celebrated figure Indian authors, he gave his medal back when the Indian Army attacked Golden Temple Complex in June 84. So the point is, it actually, regardless of whether a Sikh belonged to a Congress party or the opposition parties, whether they worked for Indian government or not, this created the emotions were such that there's anthropologists from here, Belfast University, Joyce Pettigrew, and her phrase is, what happened in 84 was not about a political party or a political figure, it was attack on Sikh nation, and that's how every Sikh feels.
But going before 1984, Harinder, could an Indian, a non-Sikh perhaps, be forgiven for saying, well, the Sikhs never wanted to be a part of India, that there was a movement for Khalistan, they wanted to be independent, therefore they were always seen as a fifth column, as it were, that a group of people within the same landmass as us who actually didn't want to be part of us. Not, of course, that's any excuse for what happened to the Sikhs, but just looking and seeing that you can't have it both ways.
We have to contextualize both conversations a little bit separately, but we can bring them together. So in 84, the issue of Khalistan was not brought in when these things happened. The Khalistan issue, the movement so-called, the militant movement in Punjab and by the Sikhs in Indian context, actually started after 1984 as one of the responses that enough is enough, and you are,
it wasn't existing before, because of
No.
course, but of course there was a movement to say
so-
that Punjab is the breadbasket of India,
That's right.
and we are being unfairly treated
That's right.
by the state in Delhi.
That's
and
right.
there was that feeling that we are being betrayed. And that was maybe perhaps more of a Punjab thing than it was a Sikh thing. But
it was actually both. But what I was trying
Right.
to say was the militancy movement in Punjab, which it started after 1984, but the movement has been there since 1947, since 40s actually.
Right.
Because when
but the word Khalistan didn't happen after
no,
84.
actually it did.
It did.
Actually started in 40s. The word Khalistan
In 1940s.
40s, Khalistan,
Right,
Sikhistan, Azad Punjab, Maha Punjab, the words were floated
Right.
because Sikhs were third party. In the Simon Commission, actually, if you go at when he was put in charge of how to transfer sovereignty to India as a separate country,
Yeah.
he says he's dealing with three communities. He actually says he's dealing with Muslims, Sikhs, and the other. And under the other, he classified all the denomination of Hinduism and
Jains, the Buddhists,
and others,
etc.
exactly. And so Sikhs were always party to it. But for whatever reason, Sikh leadership in 47 decided to go with India. But in independent India, after August 15, 1947, there have been systematic discriminatory policies, which first one being, they adopted a constitution which did not give minority rights to Sikhs. And in 60s, the Punjab had to fight for its statehood for 16 years while every other state was given statehood. And then, there are other things going on. There was an Armed Services Act which actually focused on Sikhs, which basically said your representation in the armed forces has to equal to your representation in general population. The target was Sikhs, because when British left India, Sikhs were about 30%, and the idea is to reduce the Sikh percentage in the army
Right.
to half, eventually 2%. So there are discriminatory, there are economic policies which were an issue. River water issues from Punjab are violating all international and Indian convention, including Indian constitution. So those all added up, and in 84 they became, when the attack, or there were genocidal campaigns in June and July and November are the two people hear of, but there were several things in the middle, but all those things collided, and eventually a response came to develop a separate own country at some point within Punjab.
It's interesting. This fissure, this split that seems to have developed between the state of India and Sikhs seems to be not a religious one, but a political one, in the sense that, would I be right in saying that Hindus were instrumental in helping to spread Sikhism, in the sense that was it the firstborn son had to be a Sikh, or there was certainly a lot of convergence between Sikhism and Hinduism. So it would be perhaps not correct to say that this is a religious issue, but a political one.
Well, according to the official political party of the Sikhs in India, Shromani Akali Dal, in 1971 they put out a manifesto where they listed all the demands. Some of them included religious demands as well. But I think in a larger thesis, you're right, there have been multiple traditions among the Sikhs, and primarily this fight seems to be of economic and political rights, and religious being one of them, which eventually becomes political and constitutional, that Sikhs have a separate identity, religious identity, and we should be recognized as such. Like in independent India, for example, when India became independent, Sikhs used to have their own marriage act called Anand Marriage Act under British India, but it was repealed in independent India and replaced with Hindu Marriage Act. So like, I'm born in India, my birth certificate says that not I'm a Sikh, it says I'm a Hindu. It's a forced identity. I did not get married in India. I actually fled India after 1984. I was 12 years old as a survivor of the genocidal campaigns, and I didn't want to go back to India and get married, because my marriage certificate, even today, if I get married in India, will say that I'm married in a Hindu Marriage Act.
But this is the thing, isn't it? There are two massive issues here. One, there is no closure around 1984. Second one, which is one I hear often, is the fact that Sikhism is not regarded as a separate religion under the Indian constitution.
That's right.
And that it's a branch of Hinduism, which many Sikhs regard as an insult. Not because they have any problem with Hinduism, but because they feel that they have, quite rightly, a very clear
It's
religious
like,
identity.
It's like in the earlier discussion you were saying, no woman should allow her to, should allow any man to tell her what to do with her life. It's the same thing. It's a basic human right. If I believe in a separate identity, it should be allowed.
But, Harinder, equally, do you feel that some Sikhs have a victim mentality? Do you feel that there is everyone's out to get us. In many ways, that people accuse the Israelis of often having the same kind of mentality.
Yes.
Do you feel that is a valid
I actually say this regarding post-1984 scenario, that in the history of 500 and almost 50 years of Sikh history, this is the first time in our history that Sikhs continue to ask the perpetrators of 1984 to give us justice. And we have definitely developed victim mentality. Earlier Sikhs, whenever they were even victims or targets in terms of killings and loot, they never would complain that why is this happening to us? They would say, well, if this is happening to us, we better figure out how to strengthen ourselves and give proper responses. So yes, I think a section of community definitely has developed this victim mentality, which is very, very foreign to Sikh theology and Sikh doctrine.
Is it destructive?
It is very destructive.
In what way?
But it's because then we are waiting for someone to come help us, rather than equipping ourselves legally, intellectually, institutional building, network building, social capital to take care of these things on our own. Now, the other flip side of this is that when somebody is living in victim mentality, then you're always looking for someone to come give justice to you. Now, this is a bigger issue intellectually and doctrinally, because if we feel we are sovereign people and we have direct relationship with the divine, we are independent faith, then we need to prepare ourselves to deal with these things and create right alliances to get things done.
Well, you're not empowered, are you, if you're a victim? Yes.
So that's the word I've been using quite a bit, that, in fact, I present 1984 as not been as a singular event in Sikh history. Sikhs there are two great holocausts in 18th century where half of Sikh population was killed in one day in 1764. We survived that. So, community has been a target by states and the rulers of South Asia, because one of the essential elements of being a Sikh is to fight for economic and political rights of everyone, not just Sikhs. So anytime you do that, the government of the time doesn't like that. And I give example of America under Bush presidency there. There was a campus watch list which was developed, where all the professors who spoke in administrations were being targeted that they should not get promotions. So every government does this. My thing is...
Right, it's like the 1950s.
Exactly. McCarthyism and all those things come in there.
Harinder, tell me about this lobbying then, because... You, of course, live, and I presume now are a citizen of the most powerful country on earth, the United States. And on Capitol Hill, where all the power is discussed in Washington, what is the appetite for pressuring the Indian government to look into what happened to 1984 and do something about it? And are you involved in trying to make sure that those conversations are had, and when Hillary Clinton is in India, her people mention it to Manmohan Singh's people?
The two-pronged response to this one. First is, Sikhs themselves need to understand how things get done and develop institutions to get these things done. It has taken Armenians 80 years to get a genocide bill passed in the U.S. Congress.
And the Turkish are still not having any of it.
I'm saying in the U.S. Congress, it's taken them that long, and so they had to create certain systems how it gets done.
Well, look what the Palestinians are trying to do at the UN.
Exactly, and the first thing I will share here is I grew up in Kansas City. Growing up in Kansas City,
that notoriously Sikh area of America,
growing up there, I learned very quickly that the ways of the world are very, very different. The emotional emailing and shouting is not the answer. I mean, they have their own places sometimes to create an emotional regrouping of a particular group, but essentially we need to figure out where the policy makings of the world are. And in that regard, I was in Capitol Hill a month ago lobbying for a bill which has to do with prisoners' rights in America, because America has the largest incarceration population of prisoners. We need to build alliances like that. So similar issues are happening in India for Sikhs. If people see that, hey, this is not just about Sikhs, we really believe in this. Recently Diwali just passed by and all South Asians celebrate this. The Sikh angle to Diwali is that a sixth Guru Hargobind...
It's a day of freedom.
It's a day of freedom, that he actually was being released from jail by Jahangir.
And freedom is a big word in America, isn't it?
And not just that, it wasn't enough for him to go out of jail himself. He says, what about other prisoners? And he wanted every prisoner released.
He took them all out, didn't he?
Exactly.
And they all held on to ribbons from...
There you go. So you're very aware of the idea is, if you want to have firecrackers and sweets, great, but we should think about how many more freedoms have we brought about from last Diwali. So this is the kind of stuff which I'm more involved in. Awareness generation, where people actually feel the pains and sufferings of other communities, and so such that when we present Sikh issue, it's not just because it's the Sikhs who were targets, it's because this is also a violation of fundamental human rights.
Is there something in the Sikh psyche, going back to being a warrior race, that means that certain members of the community feel the only way you get something done is if you are on the battlefield?
Well, that's the unfortunate stereotype which British have built on and certain Indian historians have fueled as well. This is unfortunate.
But also Sikhs have done very well of and are very proud of being warriors.
We are, but I'm saying it's the skewed data. We are poets as well. We were writers as well. We were the ones who developed the cities. Every major city in Punjab, every Sikh guru developed a new city. You know, a lot of people don't know these things. If you look at the best poet, writer Indians have produced in the early 20th century was Puran Singh, but he was never published in India. He was published in 1910 and 11 in England. So there seems to be the skewing of this data going on. Like Delhi.
But a lot of male Sikhs want to play up to that stereotype.
Well,
they want to feel that sense. And why not? And why shouldn't? Because there have been, of course... But the point you're making is don't let the battlefield antics obscure the other ones. And that seems to what's happened.
So what happens then is when you build up this martial race sort of a stereotype, then every answer is going to be fought with a sword. That's what people start thinking, which in today's term
becomes... Whether it be a lyrical or a verbal.
And then it becomes, in today's term it's a Glock, but that's not what it is. The theology in Sikhi is you exhaust all the means before you go to militant movement. For example, what we were discussing about 84, from 47 to 84, Indian state was very violent towards Sikhs, but Sikhs did not have any militant response. So we actually do follow those dictums theoretically as well as in practice.
But then what happened in 1984? Did that tell a new generation of Sikhs that that way of the gurus of saying that violence is the last option, while not disrespecting what the gurus have said that there has to be another option, and the fact is that they've taken our kindness as a weakness, and now we have to stand up to that.
I think violence
is that what happened?
That's partly what happened. Violence is not the right word. I think we will say the militant response. Even the largest peacekeeping organization in the world has a peacekeeping force, because the purpose of that force is to deliver peace. And it actually succeeded in case of Punjab, because when there were elections in Punjab, the people who were voted into power at a state level were those who fought on those behalf of the militants. But I want to come back to your earlier point about America and
and Capitol Hill lobbying.
Exactly. So I want to mention, even if there's a cursory remark by Bill Clinton's Secretary of State was Madeleine Albright.
Yes.
I was in India when Bill Clinton landed in Delhi. He went for the first trip when he went, and a night before he landed, there were killing of 35 Sikhs in Kashmir, and it was blamed on Pakistani militants. Now, I want to mention this because this gets played out in world politics quite a bit. Bill Clinton wrote a foreword to Madeleine Albright's book, and in that foreword, he made a statement: because of me, Indian police killed Sikhs in Kashmir to blame it on Pakistan. This is how he wrote this, because the Amnesty International put out a report saying that what happened in Kashmir were the vigilante groups under the DGP Gurcharan Jagat of Jammu and Kashmir. They were not the Pakistani militants, because you're trying to get world attention. Now he put that out in the first edition. In the second edition, he had to take it out because of the pressure of Indian government. Why is this? Because this is the world politics today. While growing up in Kansas City, I remember in U.S. Congress there would be a bill every year that China should not get a most favored status nation. Nobody talks about that anymore. Nobody talks about Chinese human rights. Same thing is happening. You read The Economist magazine here today, they'll tell you same thing.
Well, then you are fighting a losing battle, aren't you?
Exactly. Because everything is economics.
Because India has become more and more powerful.
Exactly. This is why, just to even mention human rights issues anymore, not just in case of India, I'm saying, in any case which is becoming an economic power, because at the end of the day it's all economics. You can't figure out, and the governments are not going to speak against it because they have economic interests. And what Americans, with the Chinese are being brought into this whole Greek
they own America. The Chinese own America's debt, don't they? I mean,
so there is a silence worldwide, and Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch have put out their annual reports last year saying there's a shift in contextualizing human rights throughout the world, because the Western nations, the so-called the progressive nations, are also now looking the other way because of their economic interests.
What do you make of Manmohan Singh? After all, he was the one that initially opened the door for India's economic liberalisation and put India onto the path where it is today, with the kind of growth figures that the West can only dream about having. But also, of course, he is a Sikh, and a very you know, you can
Visible
see
Sikh.
here, visible, there you go, there's
That's
the word,
right.
a very visible Sikh. He could do something about 84, couldn't he? It'd be very interesting to know his thoughts on 1984.
Yeah, you know, the first time Manmohan Singh as a prime minister, when he was landing in US, I was approached by several newspapers within US as to what's our take, or what's the Sikh community's take on him. So this is how I presented him. You know, he is ingenious. Economist magazine did a cover title on him a few years back where they put a picture of Adam Smith with a graphic turban and called him another Adam Smith. But that's a personal credential. One thing everyone needs to know is he represents India, not Sikhs. He is not an elected leader there. In fact, he fought one election from South Delhi, which is the most educated area of New Delhi, and his own party defeated him. So he's not an elected leader. People need to understand it. Economist magazine last month said this statement about Manmohan Singh as a politician, as a leader of the country, that he is the retainer of Gandhi dynasty. That's not my statement. This is Economist magazine statement.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would ever claim Manmohan Singh to be an adept politician.
Exactly.
By any stretch of the he's an academic, isn't he?
So,
ultimately?
you know, 1984 aside, I mean, he apologized on behalf of the of the Indian nation to the Sikhs, but it was a half-baked apology. There's analysis of that is available in Insaf. I would say, you know, when he came into power, when he was made the prime minister, the three largest perpetrators of these crimes were given the cabinet positions. So I'll rest my case there.
I think that probably answers that question, doesn't it? Harin, did you mind hanging on with us for a little while longer? Have you got a little bit more time for us?
Sure.
Yeah, because I'm very much enjoying this conversation, and I think our listeners are as well. A text has just come in saying Sikhs are treated like dirt in India. Sikhism is not considered as an independent religion. Rather, according to the Indian constitution, Sikhism is a branch of Hinduism. The Sikh wedding called Anand Karaj is not considered as an official wedding in India. Indians have done nothing regarding the Sikh riots in 84. India won't allow Amnesty International into India, as in Punjab there is a major drug issue. And let's not forget about Sikh farmers being in debt because of the ridiculous interest rates charged by India on state and loans. Well, it's not only Sikh farmers who are committing suicide, there's farmers all over India that are. Jav has asked the question, how are Sikhs treated in Pakistan?
Oh, excellent question, you know, and I can give you some first-hand experience because in last 10 years I've gone there 4 times to deliver lectures in Lahore and Islamabad. And, you know, first thing is, in Pakistan, whether it's a reactionary or a proactive measure, they actually have created an independent marriage act for Sikhs. So this is very, very interesting phenomena. This is all happening in Pakistan.
Not one in India.
There's not one in India,
but there is one in Pakistan. Right,
this is very interesting, and it all happened in the last 5-10 years. The other thing which has happened there is...
How did that happen?
I think this is probably part of the geopolitics of South Asia, to be fair about it. But there was a
not quiet diplomacy from Sikhs?
That's part of it. I'm saying in the larger framework, it fits into the geopolitical interests of certain nations to help these things. But obviously Sikhs lobbied for it, and it happened. But, you know, the Gurdwaras have been brought under a particular organization to protect the Gurdwaras.
Well, of course, some of the Sikhs' holiest shrines are in Pakistan, aren't they? Are they
it's
treated
like
well?
Mecca. Yeah, actually, you know, they're in better condition now once the organization was developed. I go on both sides of Punjab and India and Pakistan. I'm a regular on both sides, so I'm comparing and contrasting what's happening. But in Pakistan also, you know, they have, because Sikhs are a minority among minorities in Pakistan.
Yes, of course.
As well. So they have created exceptions to allow Sikhs in armed forces or traffic police, and few of them are not getting into medical school, other schools as well. So I would say, you know, it's a very anecdotal examples what I'm giving right now. We don't have a statistical analysis of what's happening, but we will say at least at a ceremonial and symbolic and certain rights level, there seems to be sort of a progressive agenda developing there, although, as I said, it's framed in the larger geopolitics of that country. But, you know, your text earlier, as well as you also said this, so I want to talk about the word riot. In 1984 November, what happened were not riots. Indian government now agrees, Amnesty International, every major organization, including Mr. Folka, it was genocidal campaign because riot implies two sides killing each other.
Yes.
Every casualty in November 84, Manushi, which is a women's general, journal out of India. Its editor is Madhu Kishwar. She was the first person on the scene trying to figure out how many people died. And she said there were about 10,000 Sikhs killed, not a single Hindu was killed. But point being, it's not a riot. By calling it a riot, you're minimizing what really happened that day. It was a carnage, a genocidal campaign, or legal word is pogrom right now.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to Aaron in Leicester who called in, and after that we'll go to Noreen Khan to find out what's coming up on the Drive show on the BBC Asia Network. Aaron, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you, mate?
I'm very well, sir. Thank you for calling in. Is there a question you'd like to ask Harinder, or is there a point you would like to make, or both?
I would like to ask Mr. Harinder, Sat Sri Akal Harinder ji.
Sat Sri Akal ji.
I am basically from India, Punjab. I am a Hindu.
Hanji.
I totally agree with your points, but I have difference of views about 1984 riots.
Right, okay. Firstly, people would have a issue with calling them riots, as Harinder just pointed out. But secondly, Aaron, what's your opinion on what happened in '84?
The main thing is terrorism was started after 1980, not after 1984. And the second thing is the Hindus suffered in Indian Punjab state, and the Sikhs, I got plenty of relatives as my Sikh relatives. They suffered all over India after 1984, Indira Gandhi's murder. It's a very, very complicated issue, but I think Mr. Harinder must agree with me. Terrorism in India was started after 1980, not after 1984.
After 1980?
Yeah, 1980. I was in India. I am born in India. I was doing my graduation in 1979 when it started. I was trapped in the shootouts 2-3 times, and I am lucky enough to be survived that shootouts.
I thank you for sharing that, and I have two-pronged response to this. I also was in India. In fact, I was never in Punjab. I grew up in a city called Jhansi, UP, and I'm a survivor of November '84 from there. Yeah. But two things I want to point out here. Yeah. You know, this is the narrative, what you just heard from your caller, is a very popular narrative, that this is what happened, Hindus in Punjab were being killed by Sikhs. But here I will only cite you a book written by a former DGP of Punjab, Julio Ribeiro. He wrote a book called Bullet for Bullet. And he says that we used to send vigilante groups dressed as Sikhs to pull few Hindus out of the books and kill them, and we will send a press release to the Indian daily saying that the Sikhs have done this. So it's a complicated scenario. You know, we know that these kind of things do happen. The own DGP of Punjab is admitting to this.
But Harinder, as we know, these matters are often shades of grey, aren't they?
Exactly.
The shades of grey.
Yes.
So would you be willing to stand there and say that there wasn't any Sikh attacks on Hindus before 1984?
Oh, I am willing to say that. The reason I'm saying that is after 80s, you see more of that. Actually, what happened until between 1947 and 1984, you have systematic policies which are targeted towards Sikhs, primarily economic and political, and few religious ones. And at some point, when there was an invasion of 1984 of June in Punjab. Actually, that was not just the whole Punjab was cordoned off. Why is it that here are a certain question I want your callers to know, because at some point it becomes what does one caller say versus what I have to say. If Amnesty International packed up its bags from India now, not just Punjab, they're saying they cannot file any reports. They just stopped their office in India and they have come back to UK. When Australian Dateline is not allowed to give interviews, when Human Rights Watch, Physicians for Human Rights, these are international human rights organizations who are not looking at were there extrajudicial activities done by state? Of course there were. Were there responses which certain Sikh subgroups gave which were extrajudicial? Of course there were. How can we deny any of these things? But they do not take away from the systematic attacks, pogroms of 1984. They do not take away from the genesis of these issues.
There weren't any Sikhs that wanted to see the Punjab as a Hindu-free zone.
No. I mean, this totally goes against the manifesto which the political party developed. This totally goes against the Sikh doctrine. And it does have a political...
Well, it goes against the relationship between the two religions from the birth of the religion itself.
In the post-47 scenario, this is often presented as a Hindu-Sikh conflict, and we need to totally differentiate it. It's a conflict between Sikhs and the Indian state, which deals with regressive policies.
Mrs. Kaur is asking a very interesting question. What does Harinder think of the large volume of low-caste workers from Bihar moving into the Punjab? Is it deliberate as Sikhs are moving abroad and Hindus moving in?
Again, we have to be very careful with not to make it a Hindu-Sikh thing again, but I'm going to take this question in spirit. Absolutely, the voter bank is being changed. If you go to Punjab today, there is not a single...
On purpose?
There's
or
not
do you believe that because Punjab is a victim of his own success, and you could have a similar discussion about the fact that there are so many workers from poorer parts of the European Union coming into the UK.
That's right.
And then the employers argue the fact is that A lot of the people who don't want to do those jobs, and B, we have a skill shortage.
Well, so we look at both. We look at both angles. So one is, there is the third migration of Sikhs, the large third migration of Sikhs, third wave, is considered post-84. If you go to interview of the people, those who came here to the European and America and Canada, Western world basically, why they left Punjab, the number one issue is politics, political asylums, number two is economic success. So we know why people flee Punjab. Second thing is, if there is a political vote bank is being changed, why are the housing being developed for those people for concessional or subsidized rates for their housings? Punjab does not have a single city today other than Mohali, which has now become a district. Other than that, there's not a single city in Punjab which has a majority Sikh population. So you better believe it that the dynamics and demographics are changing very rapidly. But
is that a natural flow of labour? I hate to sound naive.
I think some of it is.
Because there's globalisation and the fact that people are being attracted to cities.
I'm saying oversimplifications are very dangerous. I'm conceding that that's part of it, but I'm also conceding when you have housing complexes being developed by the government and being given at concessional rates, there is some encouragement occurring.
Okay, is that because then, looking into the mind of a strategist in the Indian government and Congress, that the Punjab is still regarded as a problem?
I think...
or a Sikh majority in the Punjab is problematic for the Indian state. It
depends on who you ask. If you ask, I have had interactions with when BJP was in power and their Minister Murli Manohar Joshi, he was very blanket about it. He says, we've already killed you guys and we are after Muslims now. He is on record saying these things. When you look
what a charming man.
Yeah, well, and then, when you look at the Congress party, which claims to be a secular party, and even this week on NDTV, there's a program to talk about 1984 programs, and their Congress spokesperson comes up there. He says, we are a secular party. We are not violating anyone's right. If anyone has done anything wrong, then they should be persecuted. And then Mr. Fulka asked, and he said, prosecuted, sorry. And
then a Freudian slip.
Oh, sorry, yeah, prosecuted, that's right. Perhaps that's what certain Sikhs feel, exactly. And I was saying that there's a section of community which feels that. Yeah. And then Mr. Fulka said, well, this is not accurate. He says the sitting government is shielding those people and giving them cabinet minister positions. So how can you say that you're delaying mechanisms? So I would say the relationship is very tense between Indian state and Sikhs. And just like any other community, there will be variations of experiences, and those experiences become narratives. All I'm here to share with your audience and you is that the Sikh narrative of a lot of these things is missing. And the Sikh narrative is going to come out of people who are survivors and victims and those who are thinking about these things from a doctrinal angle of what it means to be a Sikh, and not just repeating the stories which floated in 1984. Just to remind your viewers, in 1984, the TV and radio were owned by state. So whatever people heard was state's version.
There is a danger, is there not, of Sikhs being brought together by the negative in this, isn't there?
Yes.
Defined by a negative event which obscures all the positives.
That's right.
And that must be something that you must be quite scared of for the future. You don't want a new generation and a new generation. While you want them to be reminded of it, you certainly don't want them to be defined by it.
Absolutely not. And
do you think it's helpful for there to be pictures of people who were killed in gurdwaras?
Well, this is where I have two responses to this. Growing up in Kansas City, I remember I went to one of the liberal synagogues, and I was walking to meet the rabbi, and I had to go through very graphic pictures, and I got to him and I asked him, why do you have these bloody and gory pictures of Holocaust?
The children to see.
Exactly, and about gas chambers and all those things. Yeah. He's like, this way, I don't have to tell them. They have to be reminded every time this is what happened to us. So there is a saying in academic as well as religious and social circles that we must always be ready to forgive, but not forget. So that's one response. Second thing I want to say is I have personally gone through that journey. When I moved out of India, I was 12 years old. I was a very angry young man because I had seen our house was burned down. I saw who was burning our house down. I also remember a Hindu. I lived in a Hindu neighborhood. Nobody helped us except one Hindu neighbor. And second day in the market, he was beaten for helping us. So there are very complex dynamics. This is why it's not as simple as, Hindu-Sikh conflict. There are other things going on. What I decided to do eventually was, education, I believe, awareness generation is the number one thing to do. I chose to channelize my energies towards creating awareness and creating rehabilitation for victims who go through this. I went back to India after 15 years in 97, and one of the projects I worked on was I created with a grant from UN Subcommittee on Torture, because there were tortures which were occurring in Punjab and Indian state denies it. We created a trauma center for rehabilitation of victims of torture. So, doing that, documenting what happened, envisioning, and this is what I say to Sikh community, and I'll say this to your audience as well. 1 out of 7 person in this world is Indian. Every Indian needs to take this issue seriously. If they would have taken this seriously, there would have been no killings in Bombay in 95, and Gujarat of 2002 would have never happened. The reason these atrocities continue is because what happens is certain community is killed, they prepone election, and the person gets voted into power by highest margins. So now you are, it's like legal apartheid. You are legalizing the genocides that people believe in it, and the guy who is responsible for it, they're going to get voted into power the most. Every Indian should be very, very concerned. This is what the India's Attorney General of India, Soli Saurabhji, and he is a special rapporteur to UN, he has said that this issue is a criminalization of Indian governance, and this is the number one issue.
Harinder, it's been absolutely fascinating speaking to you. Absolutely, thank you so much.
Sounds of Asian Britain on digital TV and online.
This is BBC Asian Network.
Harinder, we didn't even get a chance really to talk about your site because